Hi, I'm Doug Fields, and I want to thank you for listening to this audio training from Youth Leader Training on the Go. Discipline and discipleship are closely related, and we'll talk about that in this audio training. What is the purpose of discipline? Well, biblically speaking, discipline is not a necessary evil. Rather, it's a necessary good because of evil. So while discipline may serve to help in keeping the peace, its primary purpose is to help students mature spiritually. There's the connection between discipline and discipleship. Here are a few guidelines to help you have positive discipline with your students. Number 1, expect good behavior. Students rise and fall to our levels of expectation. Set a tone of positive expectation. In your ministry, anticipate that students will participate, cooperate, and enjoy the programs. Be genuinely surprised when that doesn't happen, and then try to communicate that expectation when they get out of line. Always arrive to your youth programs positive and expecting great things from God and great behavior from students. Take time alone to prepare mentally and spiritually before you arrive, especially after a frustrating day on the job or a fight with a spouse or a child or something like that. When students get out of line, remember Jesus' words in John 8, verse 44. He said, "You belong to your father, the devil." Okay, I'm just kidding. But it's okay to smile. Release a little laughter and then remind yourself that the teenager you're frustrated with was made in the image of God. Number 2, communicate clearly. Make sure you don't waste rules. Students will only remember and follow a few rules anyway. I want to encourage you to tell students that you have 2 goals and 2 rules. Our goals are, number 1, to have fun, and number 2, to think. The 2 rules are, number 1, don't talk while others are talking. Now, number 2, show respect when someone shares something. For the majority of students, that's all it will take. For the others, and you know who they are, the ones who don't get it, be clear about behavior. Communicate clearly. Be specific with your communication. For example, you might say, "When you burp, it disrupts the group and makes me angry because I know there are others who want to learn and don't want to be distracted." Let's consider what this does. 1, you're communicating the specific action that is troublesome. In this illustration, it's a burp. It could be anything. And you're communicating specifically how it makes you feel, angry, and why, because it's disruptive. That's clear communication. Clear communication means that you lay out the ground rules as well as the consequences. Here's an illustration. Every year before our annual summer camp, I clearly explain the rules and I clearly explain the consequences. I say, even though I know this won't be an issue, I want to tell you a few rules. No smoking, no drinking, no illegal drugs, don't kill anyone, whatever the rules are. The consequences to these actions are if anyone breaks the rules, they will earn a one-way trip home from camp at the expense of their parents. One year, a leader caught Chris smoking. Chris's parents got a phone call explaining what had happened. They had to drive 6 hours to pick Chris up from camp. The family was mad. Chris thought it was unfair. Many of the students thought it was too harsh, but we followed through with the consequence. Not only did this communicate to Chris that we were serious about the consequences, but it also communicated to the other students that we will be clear about the consequences and we will follow through by enforcing them in a loving manner. And that's the 3rd action. Enforce lovingly. Here are some thoughts on how to enforce lovingly. First, don't embarrass a student. Even though you have the urge to humble the student like they are humbling you, try to stay in control. Before you speak, think through why you are responding to the behavior problem. It's not to kill the student, but to change the behavior. Here's another one. Good enforcing includes follow-up. After you've enforced lovingly, be sure to meet and debrief with the student. Remind him that you love him and believe in him and that you hope his behavior changes. Finally, don't be afraid to involve parents. In your role as a youth worker, you are a shepherd to the students you work with. A few years ago, several reliable people told me that Rob was dealing drugs. When I confronted him, he confessed. As we talked, he seemed genuinely repentant. He assured me that he thought taking drugs was stupid and that, in fact, he had already ended his involvement with those friends. That was wonderful to hear. I even believed him, kind of. Regardless of his sincerity, it was not my responsibility to hold him accountable for his actions. Rob was a minor. His parents had responsibility for him. I told Rob that he had the weekend to tell his parents the truth before I called them. I informed him on that Monday evening I would call them to make sure they knew about his drug situation. If he wanted, I would go with him for moral support as he broke the news to his parents. He understood that his parents were going to know about the issue, either from him, me, or the two of us. Thankfully, Rob told his folks on Sunday night. Okay, let's review. Number 1, you expect good behavior. Number 2, you communicate clearly. And number 3, you enforce lovingly. Think about it like this. Discipline is like a root canal. It isn't fun, but it's good for you. Both are simple but decisive procedures that keep decay from destroying a whole structure, whether it's a tooth, a person, or an entire ministry. Once done, the weak and painful is restored to a state of strength and usefulness. Discipleship and discipline go hand in hand. Thanks for taking the time to listen and learn, and thank you for loving God and pointing students toward Jesus. Thanks for doing what you do.